Hey, welcome to Beyond the Cart. This is a show where we explore the strategies, technology, and customer experiences that are shaping the future of e-commerce. I'm your host, Kyle Hamer, and we are talking about something today that every e-commerce operator wrestles with. And no, it's not customers, it's data. And not whether you have enough of it, because most brands probably have too much. The harder question is, what should you actually believe? How should you actually use it effectively? And because oftentimes Meta will tell us one thing, Google will tell us another, your GA4 is telling you something else. Shopify has other data and transaction and customer data in there. And now we're dropping AI on top of it all and asking it to tell us what to do. So how do we turn all that into better decisions without confusing more information with more insight? So joining me today is Alon Levin, VP Product Evangelism at Supermetrics. And Alon has spent more than 2 decades working at the intersection of marketing technology, data, product, business strategy, including experiences at Meta. And today his work focuses on helping marketers understand how data, measurement, and AI are kind of coming together and really changing, hopefully, the way that we evaluate performance and make better decisions. So, Alon, welcome to Beyond the Cart.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for having me.
Man, so it's good to have you. I love this topic. I think we're going to have a great conversation. But before we dive in, give us a little bit of background. Tell us how you got to where you're at today with Supermetrics and a little bit of your story.
Sure. So I started as a founder of a few technology companies. And then most of them were around marketing technology. And the last one was around advertising technology. We were building dynamic ads, I think something like 18 months before Meta did. We were Shopify partners and then BigCommerce and WooCommerce and of course, some Facebook marketing partners. And then at some point, I joined Meta and I managed all of the big ad tech partners that are working with Meta. Some of the names you probably know, like Smartly and Kensho back then, and Cargo and Products App and a few other notable names. And then at some point, I moved to Sprinklr to lead their advertising product. And then a year ago, I joined Supermetrics to lead product innovation. And now I'm focused more on product evangelism. And on the practical side, it means that I'm taking everything that's happening in the market with clients, with partners, innovation in general, come up with ideas for new products, prototype these products, get into initial product market fit with our clients, and then later on, bring it inside for our product teams to build it in a scalable way.
I love it. No, I think that's very, very cool. I imagine also with AI, you're even shipping things faster and faster. You're definitely not bored, probably with the speed at which you can ship product development now.
Yeah, exactly. So we're super excited. A bit like almost a year ago, we also started a process to make Supermetrics more AI native. So it's not just about the products that we are building, for our clients. It's also about how the company operates. And if we look at the big mission of Supermetrics since the beginning, so we started as a company that helped marketers to bring the Facebook and Google marketing data into spreadsheets, into Excel, into Google Sheets. And then later on, we moved into moving this data into data warehouses. But we always had also like this normalization layer that I'm going to talk a little bit about it later. But we were there to always help marketers to make better decisions, and also always helping them adopt the newest technologies, so they won't be left behind. And now with AI, with a set of tools and technologies that I'll mention later, we help them to actually leverage AI in a practical way, because we always hear about AI, and sometimes your CEO will tell you, hey, we need more AI in the company, but you don't know really what to do with it on a daily basis. And we actually had our annual marketing survey not so long ago. If I remember correctly, the numbers, 82% of the companies and agencies that we asked about, if the company wants to adopt AI, 82% said that they're getting pressure from their from leadership, and then but only 6% of them actually did something with it. So what we do is we're practically helping marketers to leverage and to enjoy these technology advances.
I love it. No, I think that's super smart. It's definitely the theme that I've seen as well. It's like everyone wants to implement AI, they're not really sure how to start or how to measure its effectiveness is also a challenge that people are running into. Before we talk about AI, I want to dive into one of the basic problems around data that I see with clients. Because as an e-commerce operator, I open up my Shopify store, or I open up my Meta platform, or Google, or GA4, Klaviyo, whatever it is. You have 5 different platforms, and they're all telling you slightly different versions of what happened yesterday. So how do we then turn this fragmented data into real-time decisions? Like, what's your take on sort of bringing all that data together and using these tools or using a platform like Supermetrics to kind of make sense of it?
Yeah, so if I need to go to the way Supermetrics is built, or maybe a little bit about our infrastructures, so we have a bit over 200 connectors to marketing platforms. It can be advertising platforms, it can be CRMs, and data warehouses. And basically, once we bring everything into a platform, we have this normalization layer that helps marketers to actually know that cost on Google is actually spent on Meta, and then when they want to create this kind of holistic picture of what they see, it helps them to bring all the data together. We help them to blend the data, to transform the data. But I think that if we're looking for the source of truth to for each business to understand if they're profitable and to understand attribution, it really depends on the business. And we see that advanced marketers actually have their own formulas, their own computed return on ad spend. So there's no one formula for that. Businesses really need to understand it, to create their own formula and then test this formula across at least several months. Really depends on your scale, of course. But what we help them do is to bring this data easily into any system that they would like to test it with. And now we help them to bring everything into LLM. So we have connectors for Claude and ChatGPT and Copilot and of course all the rest. And what we do there is we on top of the normalization layer, we also add the semantic layer that actually helps the LLM to really understand how to use the data and what to do. So LLMs are smart, and they're getting smarter, almost every day. But the idea here is to really give the LLM this additional knowledge and additional marketing know-how and expertise to really understand how to work with this data. So if I will ask Claude to give me like a full e-com funnel kind of like report, it knows that e-com funnel looks like impressions and clicks, and then page view and add to cart and initiate checkout and eventually purchase. So we give all this context, and we help marketers to actually build those kind of formulas for themselves. And I think that one of the things that is really great to do with LLMs, and we can build skills for that, is actually run a lot of things that usually marketers want to do, but they don't have the time, like really run A/B tests and really try a lot of things in parallel, of course, within reason. But the idea here is to really get the LLM to run a lot of tests, calculate whatever they get from these tests, and then try other things.
I love it. I think one of the things that I heard you hit on, which I think is really, really important, I want to cycle back to it real quick, was this idea that your data is there and you can normalize it, which is important because a lot of times when you're using platforms like, for example, with Shopify's Sidekick or whatever, the AI, it's literally just text to SQL is what they're using to run stuff. And if you ever played around with it trying to get a report, you're like, no, that's not what I want, right? So adding that semantic layer and normalization to the data is a critical step. So I love that. But then it's also attaching it to business goals, business strategy, and what that's unique to what that organization wants, right? Because not every ROAS is created equal, right? Like you might have some that are hyper focused on front end first purchase profitability, but you have other brands because of their continuity, right? And because of their LTV and they are selling a consumable, they're like, if we break or we lose money on the front end, we're fine with it because we know on average we're going to build out, a much higher LTV. So how you design your data sets and how you think about your business outcomes just shift differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we see it is we want to be able to give LLMs all the data that all the data that you have. So it means that it's not just when we talk about data, we usually talk about ad platforms, but think about all the data that you also have in Shopify and in CRM. And if you connect all the data, then you really can identify products. We're talking here about mostly e-com, but we can actually identify products that are more profitable for you, because if you only look on ROAS, you might see that, hey, I'm selling a lot of these products, but Meta don't really see the returns. Meta don't really have the cost of production or shipping or everything else. So once you bring everything together, if you bring everything from your CRM, and maybe in your CRM, you can see that a lot of people are complaining about one of your products, and it creates some bad reputation. These are things that you want to know. And when you have all the data, LLMs today are smart enough to actually connect all the dots and really understand. And sometimes you can find hidden gems in your store that you didn't think of leverage, and then you realize that you can bring it to front and sell more. You can micro segment some of the things. You can even let Claude to be your conversion rate optimization expert, because it can see through our connectors, it can see your product pages, and it can actually analyze it, and it can tell you, hey, the description is not good enough, and it can also run some minor A/B tests on different pages, and then maybe come up with some insights. One other thing that could be cool is if you connect tools like VW or Optimize, by Google, that can actually change your page based on UTM params. Then you can run some tests in real time, and you can actually create this situation where you can have ads, and then you can create this message continuity where someone is seeing an ad and there was a specific message. Once they hit this link and you have the right parameters and you use Optimize, you can actually change the message in the page and just match it to different audiences. So you can, with the right connectivity and have the LLM as an engine. And I didn't even talk about companies context. We can get to that. But you can create things that you could never before, when people used to run this business.
100%. No, I think that's super, super smart way to approach it. Now, you've spent time in major advertising platforms, building tools for these platforms, working across different ecosystems, now at Supermetrics. What's changed the way that you think about maybe numbers advertising platforms give marketers, or the data that you kind of touched on a little bit, right? When you think about it isolated on that platform, it doesn't have all of the context. It's not going to give you, CM3 level understanding of your product, right? Walk us through a little bit about like what sort of shaped and changed over time as you've kind of seen the progression of working and seeing those platforms versus what you're now, where you're seeing a little things more holistically.
Yeah, so I think that one of the major changes, and it's not a new one, but I don't think that people actually leveraging it enough, is 10 years ago we needed to be targeting experts, and we needed to really fine-tune our targeting to the right people in the right segments. But then Meta came with Advantage Plus, and then Google came with with PMax, and what they told you is that just tell us what you want, give us enough creatives, and we will do the rest. You don't really need to use targeting. They just wanted, we used to call it kind of like liquidity. So just give us the budget, and we moved into campaign budget optimization. Just give us the budget, and we will do the rest for you. And I think that not a lot of advertisers are still utilizing it. But I think that with AI and with the the way that you can automate creative production. And creative production is something that I don't think everyone is there yet. And there are a lot of great tools out there like Remotion, and a lot of great tools like High-Frames that can actually create a real powerhouse for you to create your creatives, and then be able to give it to the platforms and let them focus on the optimization and targeting. And there are a lot of things that I think marketers don't know, but you can actually send, at least to Meta, some additional data like profitability, but not necessarily in a way that you want Meta to know how much you make, for every product, but kind of rate your products in terms of, just give them like group names, and it can help Meta to push the right products for you.
I love that. Talk more about it. Like what other data would you push into Meta?
So I don't really remember the parameter name because it's in the API and I haven't touched it in a while. But it's actually a way for you to give Meta the signal if these products are more profitable to you. Not in absolute numbers, but then Meta knows to if they show some kind of like upsell, you create this upsell carousel. It can actually try to push those profitable products more. And actually, one of the partners I used to work with, they actually, and this is something that is public, they actually managed to understand that Meta is showing usually 20%. If let's say that you upload a catalog to Meta, they will usually show only 20% of this catalog. And and they will keep showing it because they're getting signals from your store, from the pixel. They're getting signals that these products are kind of popular, but basically just a loop that feeds itself. And the thing is that if you create sometimes subsets of the catalog, which is, by the way, something that Meta doesn't like, it goes against like the best practices, but sometimes you need to manipulate it a little bit because 80% of your product are not being shown out there. So sometimes you just need to tweak it a little bit. Yeah.
That is 100% true.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
Especially when you get like a good pop in performance on one, and you're running, say, like a like a CBO campaign or something, and then that one product just immediately gets all of the budget. Oh, that campaign gets all the budget, and all your other stuff, you're like, it didn't even get tested. Like, we don't even have statistical relevance whether or not that these other products are going to be viable. So yeah, I think that's a great point. When you're testing stuff out, you got to make sure you get it enough budget.
Just one more thing about it. Think that what we also offer, in our connector, for Claude or for the other platforms, is not just the ability to read the data, but we also help you to manage campaign with it. So it's like a two-way thing. It's not just analytics. So basically, you can create this machine that looks at the data and then also updates. We allow Claude to also make updates to your account. So currently, I think that for campaign management, we support Facebook and Google and ChatGPT ads and LinkedIn and Microsoft and TikTok. I think that we're about to add Snap really soon. But think about that you have all the platforms in a way that you can actually make changes. So if you're getting signals from Google Search Console, which is also connected to you also connected it to Supermetrics and to Claude through that, and you're getting this, you have the data, and the LM can see the data. It can see that people are searching for some products that are underrepresented in your dynamic ads, for example, or your Advantage Plus ads, and it can make the changes for you. So it's also the closing the loop. It's not just you have the data. Okay, now go and do the hard work. It also helps you with this kind of work.
No, I think that's super smart. I think, and it goes back to what you're originally talking about, which was how do you give LLMs all the context it needs in order to really give you the best strategies and advice, or implement your strategies effectively.
Yeah. So first of all, I think then on a higher level, whenever someone tells me that he couldn't get what he wanted from an LLM, it's usually because they didn't do one of three things. They didn't give enough context. They didn't give enough examples. And for what good looks like, and they're prompted poorly. And so if you give the data in a way that the LLM can read and can manage and can really understand what it means, because I think that if I remember correctly, the Google Ads API has over 700 different fields, and it's a lot of the fields are really close to each other in terms of their names, and it's a lot about the nuances, and we give the LLM the context about those nuances so it can really use the right fields and the right data. So giving the data is one thing. The second thing is if there's a company level, or let's say store level context that needs to be given, I always recommend people to look at Claude or ChatGPT as an employee that are hiring and onboarding. So if you hire a new employee tomorrow morning, you will actually give them this documents, these onboarding documents and training and whatever, so they can also understand, because not every store, or not all stores born equal. So you do need to give some context. Maybe it's about your brand, maybe it's about the problem you solve, maybe it's about your ideal client. So if you create all of this data in a way that Claude can understand, it could be markdowns, could be HTML, it doesn't matter, but in a way that Claude, or I always go to Claude, but I talk about also Gemini, the rest of the
sure.
Gemini, by the way, they don't support MCPs yet, but hopefully it's coming very soon. We do support Gemini Enterprise, which is something else. But once you give the data, once you give the context, it can be through if you go to Claude, it can be through not programs, through projects. And if you or maybe you can also create, if you have too much context, you can also connect it to Notion or something else. And if you provide all of this context and you provide all the data, and then you can also write some skills which can automate some of the your prompting. And if you have recurring tasks and things that you'd like to do, I don't know, like a daily check of everything that goes happens in your store. It could be inventory, it can be anything else, some issues. Then once you do that, the agent is going to be much smarter, because if you don't do that, they will just assume, and they will just the LLM will just assume something, and they are smart, they have a lot of know-how, but it's not your know-how.
100%. Yeah, I think it's super important to remember when you're talking with your AI or using a tool like Claude or ChatGPT, and that is that it's really designed to provide you sort of the midpoint when it's answering you, it's giving you like the most probable response, right? And that's it's typically the middle median response point that it's been graded on, right? And so when you're asking specific questions, or you need something very specific, you actually need to have it be pushed far more towards an outlier, right? Because because it's guessing otherwise. And so it gives you very generic responses, because that's what it's trying to do, unless you provide it all the context it needs to then be accurate with it.
Yes, and we all know that it's also less critical. You're absolutely right. It will always try to let you hear what you want to hear.
For sure. It'll tell you how awesome you are.
That's not what you want. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I actually retrained my Claude to not tell me how awesome I am, but actually push back, point out my inconsistencies. Do I have any logical flaws in what I'm, and so it actually will correct me. It's like, hey, well, actually, you told me before this, in a couple of chats ago, that you wanted to lock this in. Are you, is this this is a contradiction? What do you want me to do with this? I was like, oh, that's a good point. Actually, ignore what I just told you, because I forgot about that. So I think that's super important to be thinking.
Actually, on what you just mentioned, you can also create a system that actually logs decisions that you made, and then later on try to see if these decisions, try to see how this decision affected the outcome. So this is also something. Yeah, I just want to say that we made some experiments. We don't have something distinct yet, but we made some experiments in looking at the history of the changes to your account. If you change the budget or something, and other parameters, and then see how it affects your results. So far, we don't have anything interesting to say about it. But if you actually log some of the decisions that you make on the business level, and then you can go back to that, and you can actually try to see if something you did, how it affected other things. Yeah, so basically it's good to log everything, because now it logs everything automatically, so you don't really have to work for it.
Yeah, no, I think it's super cool. I think one of the things, this is a hack that I've started using whenever I launch a new larger project or something that's going to take some time, is I try to create sort of a high level business strategy document and like a doctrine document. Like, these are the non-negotiable things that need to occur for this project to be successful. And here are the things that I'm, this is how it needs to, output. And so I actually give Claude that first. Like, here's the document, right? We may make changes to this, but most likely not. And make this, these are your guardrails to operate in.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that you kind of think about that at the onset, right? Because if not, you kind of will end up meandering your way through a bunch of chat logs and having to compact multiple times because you've gone over and over and over and over the same stuff. You kind of get stuck in a loop, and so it's important that you have that to execute quickly. Quickly, there may be some questions and stuff too, so I want to get to those from the chat. So feel free to fire up some questions, and we can take that before we move on to AI without losing strategy.
Yeah. Just let me see what, Yeah. No,
so what actually is getting logged? No, I was like, what actually is getting logged from your perspective when you're working with it?
I think it's it could be
or what should you be logging? What should you be making sure you're capturing within your?
Yeah, so when we talk about strategy, it's about maybe the products that you want to sell, the market that you want to go after. It could be some changes to the content that you're creating. We barely talked about creative, but creative is a massive factor when it comes to e-com. We do know that so many products got sold so much better after you make the right video. It doesn't even have to be like an influencer, after just touching the right problem. So if you're changing something with your strategy, then try to see what happens from there. And if everything is logged with kind of like a timestamp, then you can let the LLM later on just look at all the data and try to see if you made, because try to see what happened that actually helped you to succeed, because a lot of people try to figure out why they're failing, but they don't really look and try to understand why they're succeeding, and maybe try to to scale it.
100%. Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah, it's a great point, because sometimes we have a tendency to go back and lean on our data when something's not working, not necessarily using it to be like, well, what is working? What should we be absolutely leaning into? And I think that's a great point. And you'll see leadership do that a lot too, right? It's like, what's not working? Let's go look at the data and give me this feedback of what's not working.
And also you need to understand, if you look at the data, the data won't necessarily show you what you did. And if you look at your action, not the data, but the actions, then you can try to find the correlation. And I'm not just talking about, updating budget or something like that, but I'm talking about some things that are more deep, like, changing the way you're talking about your product.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I like here's a great example of this. I have a client who we run Meta advertising for, and we had this massive weekend, took off. And I was like, this was not caused by Meta. Like, what was going on? Well, she got picked up. She did her product got picked up on the Today Show, right? And so she just had a huge bump in visibility and impressions, which drove her organic, and then that actually made the socials blow up because everyone's searching, and then you get your target. I was like, bam, just did this huge big thing. Well, it's like, if we weren't looking at the root cause of it, we're like, wow, look how awesome our advertising is because we crushed it. And I was like, well, there was some other thing that was at the root of it. Same when you look at it from when you're running a promotion, right? Yeah. You're running your ads, and it's like, oh, we're going to run this particular promotion. Well, if you're comparing it to another time period, right, and it's not running that same promotion, it's not going to be a real comparison. So understanding what's occurring within that, right, and tracking that is pretty critical for you to understanding what's actually working, what's driving the result.
Absolutely.
That's a great question. How do you avoid mistaking correlation for causation?
Yeah, this is something that we think about a lot. I think that this is where we still leverage our know-how as marketers, and sometimes we really need to understand what we are doing. So it's not an easy question. So I don't have an easy answer to that.
This is a whole other podcast episode, I think.
Yeah. There's no. It's a very good question. We also tend to deal with it quite a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I think let's maybe pivot. I think this is a good opportunity to kind of lean into AI without losing strategy. So let's talk about how do we improve performance without just sort of getting lost in the weeds. Because I mean, AI is really sort of changing something that's fundamental for us, right? So because for years, marketers, we needed analysts and we needed dashboards and we needed to be able to interrogate. We basically needed to use these data scientists to interrogate our data, right? To actually help us understand it. And now we're increasingly getting to a world where we can just ask a question to the data, right? I mean, it's this function. I mean, it is the GPT and you can chat with it. So what changes when access to analysis becomes really almost frictionless?
Yeah, this is funny because I just had the same conversation with Alex, one of our, from our product marketing team, and we always try to think at Supermetrics about the future of reporting, or the future of analytics, and think about it that if you talk about dashboards and charts and graphs. Charts and graphs are actually tools for people to actually look at something and say, hey, I have this spike here, or I have this, this drop here, and then go and try to figure out why it happened. But if the LLM sees your data, you don't even have to see the chart. It can just come and tell you, hey, I've seen, something happened there. I managed to, to find the reason for that. And, if you do things right, it will also tell you, hey, and I also fixed it. So so we actually see the near future of charts and graphs and dashboards, and we have a great product for that. We have Supermetrics Studio, where you can actually ask Claude to create a dashboard for you, and then if you want to share it and be able to share it securely with other people, then you can actually export it to Supermetrics Studio, where you can also have a lot of other controls, and you can have a appropriate dashboard to share and to use internally and externally. So we do see user, get the answers, but they still need to look at something and still need to see the evidence. So I think that graphs and charts now in the age of LLM are more, for evidence and just to have something visual to look at, because if you present something, you won't have slides just with text. You also want to show something, because people we love to see something visual. So it's more for the evidence and less for, detecting issues, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think that's a super smart way to look at it, right? It's like, how do you kind of pick out the visual patterns? Because some people are obviously more visual too than looking at an Excel spreadsheet with the data, right? Some people can see that and be like, oh, I can see the pattern, and other people are like, no, I need to have it in a graph or in a flow chart. But there's another side too to like sort of this frictionless access to data. And because if it's easier to ask more and more sophisticated questions, right, to AI, it's also easier for AI to generate very confident wrong answers, right? Like it's frictionless. We can ask it whatever we want, right? But without that context, right, and the proper prompting and structuring of it, how do we make AI more trustworthy, right? So that it's enough that somebody will actually, be able to move $1 million marketing budget based on its recommendation and have confidence in that.
Yes. So first of all, I think in general, LLMs are less, hallucinating today than they used to maybe a year ago.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But when we started to build these tools a year ago, we invested so much in building these guardrails and actually building a lot of deterministic processes that go and fetch the actual data and present the data. We don't let LLM to run calculations. We use the LLM just to understand what formulas to build and actually help us to understand what we want to see. But later on, when we pull the data and we show, if you see a number on screen, in 99.99% of the cases, it's validated, and this is the number. It's not hallucinated, and these are the actual numbers. And we invested a lot of time and effort into make sure that this is the case.
Yeah. And that's great because that solves one of the problems, right? Which is this reliable? The other side of that, and maybe you can speak to this in your own experience. You're working with a lot of brands, a lot of companies that are looking at data. It's like, I wonder, because you mentioned that there was a report, right? It's like 82% of companies that they wanted to do AI, right? But only a handful had really begun to implement. And I wonder if it's really, if the AI conversation is focusing on the wrong bottleneck, meaning maybe companies don't have truly an AI problem. It's likely they more have a decision-making problem, right? And there's a problem with the fundamental decision-making process that they can't unlock that AI and that all the data that you're kind of putting together nice and packaging it. Do you see that happening where it's just bad decision-making or not enough clarity in their decision-making process to really maximize AI?
Yeah, I think it's mostly around what they actually need to do with it, because the way we see it, marketing problems today are the same marketing problems that we had a year ago, 2 years ago. But now we have the tools. Now we have the tools just to do things faster and to actually do things that only humans cannot do. I mentioned earlier, the A/B testings, but think about creating a report. My wife, she's also in marketing, and she used to work in this agency, and they actually blocked 3 days to prepare this kind of report to one of their big clients, and then they actually managed to do it in 20 minutes with the Supermetrics connector, because they were able to get all the data, get a lot of context, like I mentioned before, context about the client that they actually kept in a very organized way for the LLM, and context about how they do business as an agency, and they managed to produce this report, and they actually blocked these 3 days, but after 20 minutes they were like, okay, we're done. So it's not that agencies don't need to create these reports for clients, but it used to take 3 days, and now it takes only 20 minutes. Another thing that used to be another thing that is taking a lot of time for agencies, and now we're solving it, is campaign planning. So I know that many of you are e-com advertisers, but if you go to an agency, and the agency works with Nike, and Nike asks the agency to run a Christmas campaign, and they give them the brief. These are the audiences, and this is the budget, and these are not the results, because the results are actually what the agency needs to come back to the client with. But this is the budget, this is the duration, and these are the audiences. Then the agency needs to go and dig in into historical data of what happened in Christmas last year, and they need to go and understand how much they pay for each click, and the CPMs and everything, and then prepare this report and go back to Nike and tell them, hey, this is the estimation for what we think will happen if we are going to run this campaign this Christmas. And this task alone takes agencies anywhere between 3 hours into 3 days. If it gets more complicated, but now we have an MCP, and we have our own connectors, and we recently added to our MCP this tool that helps you just punch in the brief. It fetches all the data from your historical campaigns. It also adds some industry benchmarks. If there was an increase in CPM, in the last year across the board, or something similar, if maybe you have more competitors in your niche, and then it gives you the numbers, and you can just let it work, go get coffee, and come back and have the numbers. And this is what I'm saying, that the problems are the same problems, but we just accelerated the way we're doing business.
I love that. Well, that's a massive efficiency gain, right? If you went from this report took me 30 or 3 days, and now it took me 20 minutes to do, right? Like, my next question, if I was in that agency, I was like, all right, now marketers, what are you going to do with the remaining 71 hours of your time that you just regained? Like, how can you be maximizing value for your clients?
Yes. So here's the thing that clients that we work with and they are more efficient now. They spend more time in providing higher quality service to their clients. Then they can bring their expertise, identifying new opportunities, identifying threats. There are so many things that we never get to do because we are so busy with everything that is urgent, reports and other things. But now you can actually get to all those things that usually you didn't have time for.
Yeah, I love that. If tomorrow I deleted every attribution dashboard report in an e-commerce company, but I left you all the underlying marketing, customer, and transaction data, what would be the first three sort of decision rules that you would sort of build into before you fed it into AI? And what would you leave out? What would you be like, I don't care about that. These are the first three things that I would just want to understand.
So I think that I would use AI maybe to segment this data, maybe just massage it a little bit, group it in a way that makes sense. Maybe before I actually feed it to the LLM and start asking questions. Because first of all, we're still limited by context window, for the LLM. It doesn't make sense to take all of your data and then just push it. What makes sense is to put your data in a database and then tell the LLM, hey, here's how I store my data. This is what you can find in each column. This is what you can find in each table. Now let's think what we can do with this data, how we can pull the data and then figure out. And eventually the LLM will probably write some SQL queries to actually get what you want from the data and calculate lifetime value and maybe find some clients that are actually high big spenders and you actually need to invest in them and other clients that maybe you spend a lot of time on them that maybe they are driving your customer service nuts, but
there you go.
And if you can understand where this client came from, because you do save, the UTM tags from the ads that they came from, and then you can maybe understand that some of your campaigns you might look good on the ROAS level on Meta or Google, but eventually these clients are just not the best fit for you.
You could basically, what you described was implementing sort of that Pareto principle, right? The 80-20 rule. It reminded me of the Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Work Week, right? Where he was like, hey, I looked at our 80% of my revenue was coming from just 20% of my clients. And there was a small fraction of these super high maintenance clients that caused all my stress, all my customer service complaints. And I literally just fired all those people and got rid of them. And, and his business took off and it blew up, right? And he eventually sold it. So I love that. And I think that is a great, smart use case, right? To be able to track that effectively. Awesome. Right. All right. So let's finish with some rapid fire questions. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Yes, but before that, I was just like, at the bottom of the screen, I just like, I see the comments and
you great see comments.
Yeah, I see the comments and I see the question. And there was one thing that caught my eye, and I really want to actually to double click on this because this is actually a fun story. So there was a question about one of my previous companies where I said that we built dynamic ads 18 months before Meta. And I just want to tell how we did it back then. So basically, we used to connect to Shopify. Yes, that's the one. And then we actually, we had integration with Shopify and with the other platforms. So if you had a store with 1,000 products, we used to pull all these 1,000 products. We used to create a custom audience for each product. And then back then, the custom audience worked fine only with one person in the audience. And then we used to create 1,000 ads, one ad per audience. And it worked amazingly well in a way that even after Meta released dynamic ads, we had so many clients that wanted to keep using this because the beauty in this was that every ad was its own post and people commented on this and it creates such an amazing social proof. So this is, talking about 2014, 2015, something like that. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. All right. Rapid. Yeah.
Rapid fire.
Yeah.
What is what is one metric that e-commerce operators don't pay enough attention to?
Profitability, but profitability is not one metric. It's a combination of ads, returns, cost, so many things, but eventually this will make or break your business.
What is one dashboard that you would eliminate from an average marketing team or stack that you're like, I don't care about this dashboard, or this data doesn't really actually help me? Ultimately, it's noise.
Good.
What's noise?
Yeah. What's noise? Probably something with audiences, something that is probably too granular, and you try to make a decision based on it. And actually, I can maybe say something. I know it's rapid, but maybe it's important for people.
Yeah, elaborate. Elaborate.
So when I was at Meta, we were building Advantage Plus shopping, which is, if you use it, it's an amazing. And the thing about it is that until then, I could describe to you, targeting an audience, women, 24, 35, like tennis, lives in Tennessee, right? But then the engineers who built it, they explained the concepts to us, which is, it's micro segments that we cannot even explain, but it's based on so many behavior, and parameters that actually creates this kind of audiences. What I want to say with this is that the way things changed and the way that we're looking at audiences, it's not, we cannot speak about audiences in the way we used to talk, 5, 6, 7 years ago. We just need to to work with the platforms, and I would just focus more on creative.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the Andromeda update for Meta has definitely proven that that's what their algorithm absolutely wants, is like, feed them the creative, make it be for the entire funnel, and then let them sort of decide in real time who they should be serving that to. I think that's super smart. What's the most overrated phrase in marketing analytics right now?
Good question. Overrated phrase.
What's the most overrated, maybe phrase or metric or something you're like, don't really love this metric, but it gets talked about a lot.
I don't have a good answer to that.
All good. That is an answer. What's one thing you believe about data today that you didn't believe or understand 5 years ago?
It's not about the understanding. It's about what to do with the data. And just things that you couldn't do before just because you didn't have the time or expertise, or even if you had the expertise. Sometimes if if there's something that you want to do and you know that you need to spend 5 hours or a day, and you don't have this time, so you need to focus on what's important. Now you can actually do a lot of tests. You can try a lot of things, and then you can see what sticks. So I think that in terms of data, just try to get to all of those things that time is not a factor anymore. Just try to experiment as much as you can.
I think that's a great call out. It's the use of AI properly collapses time, and you can just get, because fundamentally, if you break down what advertising marketing is at just the core level, it's a feedback loop, right? It's a feedback loop. You're putting out that target of like, hey, I'm going to put out this product. This is the ad. Do people respond to this ad and take the action that I want them to do? Yes, no. If it's no, next. If it's yes, how far can we scale that thing, right? And you're just repeating that loop as fast as possible in order to build scale on what you're trying to accomplish. And I think AI collapses the time it takes to implement that loop, and will continue to do so at a higher level.
Yes, but you also need to understand, of course, the platform that you work on, because the difference between Google is very much intent based. Facebook is very much, I'm going to show you something cool, and I hope that I will create intent.
It's interruption.
You
have to understand your platform, and you also need to understand the the business that you're in, right? Like if you're selling fast fashion on TikTok, yeah, it's an impulse buy. It's $25-$30. If you're selling a sauna that gets installed in somebody's house for $30,000, the life cycle, the time to purchase is going to look a lot different, right? So even though you're shortening the feedback loop, ideally, your feedback loop still might be months and months of research, and you're making the sales process. So, but it still should be able to speed up your ability to execute things. And I think that's super cool.
Absolutely, but and with it, I would also try to leverage data points from from my website, and I can give you an example, because you mentioned like a high price product. When you buy something that is just $5, $25, don't really care. You click. If it doesn't work,
right,
you return it. Even if you don't return it, you don't care. But if you buy something that that is more expensive, then you would go into the returns page, and you will read exactly all the terms and everything that you want to that you need to know. But marketers can actually leverage these kind of signals, because if someone goes to your return page, the retargeting ad can actually mention something about
sure.
that, because that they care about it. But also, like, just one thing about it in terms of attribution, like if someone needs to buy an engagement ring, someone needs to book a hotel, we know that a lot of people, they search for it and they book only after 2 months. We have great clients in the hospitality vertical, and we see that they use 60 and sometimes 90 days attribution, because these are the sales cycles.
I love it. Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, we're going to run a quick little ad. So stick around, and then we'll be back with Alon to wrap things up. I run something called Operator Sprint. First time you're hearing about it, but it's 8 weeks live for Shopify operators doing between 25 and about 200,000 a month, who have already bought courses, gone through trainings, read frameworks, but still haven't installed any or all of it. Information is the commodity. Installation is the product. So the sprint isn't a course, and it's not a mastermind. It's in 8 weeks, 8 live calls, but then you ship one deliverable every single week. And at the end, you're holding your CEO dashboard and a before and after scorecard on what actually has changed. And the guarantee that I give, if you do the pre-work and you show up for at least 6 of the 8 calls and you turn in those deliverables, and you don't have that deliverability, I'll refund you in full, and you keep everything that we've built. Operator Sprint is 10 seats or less. So if that's something that is interesting to you, you can go to omnirocket.com/sprint and book a 30-minute fit check call. If you're not a right fit, I'll tell you directly on the call, and I'll try and point you to something even better. And also, if you know anyone who might be a fit, you send them my way and let me know that you sent them, and I'd highly appreciate it. Again, that's omnirocket.com/sprint. Awesome. Yeah, go check that out. I'd love to have you check out the sprint. It'll be super cool. So with that, Alon, I think the biggest takeaway for me is I love this conversation. I think my biggest takeaway is essentially, like, it's not about getting more data. It's not about more dashboards, or it's about giving your AI tools the right things, right?
Yeah.
And that getting that trustworthy information and using a tool like Supermetrics too. That's one cool thing because I've used the platform before. So I'm familiar with the tool that you have. And it's so cool because it does allow you to just integrate all of that in there so easy, really fast. And now it's set, and you don't have to like screw around with like getting your Google API set up, and you've done all the hard work. And then normalizing that data, which I think is really, really cool. And then it goes back to just speeding that up. So for everyone listening, Alon's information and Supermetrics, it'll be in the show notes. What's the best way for people to connect with you if they wanted to go deeper or learn more about what you're doing at Supermetrics?
On LinkedIn, obviously. But just one thing, and not as a sales pitch, but if you really want to see magic happens, go to Claude, go to connectors, just add the Supermetrics connector, connect your data sources, and then start asking questions. And really, I see clients use it, and it's mind blowing.
I love it. Alon Levin, VP Product Evangelism, Supermetrics. Thank you so much for joining us on Beyond the Cart. It was a pleasure having you, and we look forward to having you again in the future.
Thank you, Kyle. I'd love that. Thank you.